Good morning, friends. How are you today? So I want to show you how to use your calculator to graph and calculate exponential equations. And this is on chapter 4, section 3. Okay? So you see on my calculator, this is a graph of a function, and this is the table. I have this split screen here. And in order to do that, well, we'll get to that. Let's just start with how we calculate. So take a look here. This is looking at section 3, problem number 3.2, Florida in the 1800s. And how you put this into your calculator. So what I do is I'm just going to take 54500 times 1.6, and I use this up arrow, and then I'm going to raise it to the third power. Okay, so using that up arrow is how you put in an exponential, and then that's going to calculate it. Now notice that I want to use this a couple times, so I can use this second enter, and notice here these are my keystrokes down here. So if I do second enter, it will bring up the most recent one I've done. So if you do second enter again, it's going to bring up the previous one. So here I've got 54500 times 1.6 to the third, and I want to raise that instead to the 1/2 power. So because I don't know how to do a 1/2, I'm just going to do 0.5 and then calculate that. So there you go. There it is to the 0.5 power. But what if I do want to put a fraction in? Well, I can do, let's do the second enter again. So second enter, and you should be following along with me with this. And I go use my arrow key to go back. And I want to put in 1/2. So I could just do 1/2, and that's going to stay up in that fraction, and then hit enter, and there you go, I get the same answer. If you actually want a fraction bar, what you can do is this. Let's do second enter again. We're going to go back here, okay? I'm going to just delete that fraction stuff. And if you go to alpha F1, there's the fraction bar, that first key there. So I could just do 1 and use the arrow key half. And then there you go, it's raised to the 1/2 power. Again, the same answer, okay? The other way to do that fraction bar is second enter again and go back here, and I'm gonna delete this, okay? And delete. And if you have the latest version of the operating system for your calculator, you can just go to alpha X, and that also gives you a fraction bar, 1/2. If you don't have the latest operating version, you can go to resources on Google Classroom, and it shows you how to update your calculator. You have to go to the TI website, okay? So that's how to put stuff into the calculator. Now we want to take a look at how we actually graph things. So we just do the same thing. We take and we go to y equals, and we put our equation in here. Now we always want to make sure that we have an x value, because if you just would put this as to the third or to the 1/2, you're just putting a constant in there. So you always want to make sure you have that x value. And then let's talk about setting the window. Now for this particular problem, the x values are decades. So you need to think about what kind of inputs make sense. So why don't you pause the video and think about what kind of inputs make sense. You also want to think about what kind of outputs make sense. So pause the video again to think about that. So what I've done is I've set my window, my decades, I'm only going up a couple decades, right? So I always want to go a little bit below and a little bit above. So I'm probably only going to go up about 50 or 60 years, but if I want to go up as much as 100 years, that's 10 decades. So I went to -4 to 10. My x scale here, since this is small intervals, I'm just going to go up by 1. So each notch on my x-axis will be 1 value, 1 point. Okay? Now, the other thing was talking about population, and my population was growing pretty big, right? So it started at 54,000, and then it went up to 136,000. So that's going up pretty quickly. It's more than doubling each time. So if, in a couple years, it's going to be up over 1 million. So I went up as high as 5 million. I started at 0, and I made my Y scale 1 million. So then every Y click every Y line is going to be 1 million. So when I go to look at my graph, this is 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, and 5 decades. This is 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, right? So after about, let's see, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decades, I'm at 1 million. And you can also see here, because I have the split graph, I can see my values here. Now, you probably have single digits here. What you can do is this. You can go to second table set. Oh, first of all, if your table doesn't show up, you can go to mode and you can scroll down. I think I might have already done this. And instead of full screen, if you do full screen, it's going to look like that. But if you do second mode, mode, and you go to split screen, graph and table, right here, graph table, that's where you get the split screen, okay? And how I get my table adjusted is this. Maybe your table's at a weird start. You can just go to second table set, and I started at 0. And since I wanted to know what half was, I put my delta table at 0.5. If you want to go up by 5s or go up by decades, you can just put 1, okay? So this is going to go up by 5 years, and that's how I get the values. So when I go to graph, there's my table of values. So if I want to know what it is at 5 years, which is a half a decade, there's my value. The other way to do it is this. I can hit the trace key, and using my arrows, so there's x equals 3, and I know that y is going to be 22,232. So if I want to go down to 0.5, I can just use my trace key and get approximately. So it's in between those two values. So see, it's not an exact. And notice how my values switch then. So instead of going to trace, another thing I can do is I can go to calculate. And if I calculate the value of x at 0.5, it will tell me what my y value is. At 0.5, it's 68,937. So there's multiple ways of doing things, okay? There's your calculator lesson for section 4, chapter 4, section 3. Bye, friends.